Okay. So welcome to part two of the Avatamsaka Sutra class. And as a reminder, the Avatamsaka Sutra is a big book. Um, it is perhaps the most complex and most ornate of all the Buddhist sutras, all the Mahayana sutras. Last time we talked basically about how the way the sutra is written and how the way the sutra is structured um, give a lot of the ideas of the sutra and of the Huayan school, which is associated strongly with the sutra. For the Huayan school, the sutra is the text. Um, we talked about the ornateness of the prose. We talked about the more restrained and at times spare poetry. We talked about the very important metaphor of the various Buddha's body parts emitting light. We talked about where the take place. We talked about the cast of characters going from, Vairocana Buddha, the Buddha who is sort of coterminous with the universe, who imbues every atom of the universe, every atom of space, all the way to working people and prostitutes and people like that in Sudana's journey. We talked about the plethora of lists, and I won't go over them. I stopped at listing one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight times of, nine times of types of lists, but there are many more lists in there. And we talked about how this ornateness and this complexity and this very broad cast of characters sort of embodied, without having to say it, embodied the interpenetration of phenomena, emptiness, that the whole universe is present in each particle, that there are many universes, that time and space are flexible and interpenetrate, the relation of mind and action and world, that mind is the world's true nature. Um, we talked about how these, simply the structure of it and the rhetoric of it, get this message across much more clearly than it would, or rather much more effectively than it would if it was just, well, everything's connected to everything else, and it's like this. You just get swept up in this vision. You can't help yourself. That is, if you read it. So, and we also talked about how it's meant in some ways to be recited, and we talked about that also. And that's another part of this internalization of this very complex method. And I mentioned briefly that on the one hand, much of this is foundational to Zen, and on the other hand, some of it is extremely different from Zen. And I'm going to repeat, because I had mentioned this last time, but I'll repeat, the main thing that makes it very different from Zen is the gradual process towards liberation. So you have this 10 stages of this and the 10 qualities of that. And you have this notion of people having to work through eon after eon after eon, because of course there's rebirth, and even universe after universe, kalpa after kalpa, of very hard practice before they can awaken. So that's very fundamental in the sutra. But another thing that's fundamental in the sutra is that beings go through these long processes and then suddenly, boom, they wake up. Now, Zen tends to focus on the boom, they wake up, right? We don't say, oh, you have to pass through these 10 stages. We don't say you have to do this, 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 and this. We don't do anything like that. We focus on the instant of waking up. But that's also there in this sutra, and I wanted to make that clear. So now we're going to talk about, we're going to focus more on the very specific philosophy in this sutra, the sort of stuff that if you were to take a philosophy class based on the Mahayana Sutra, this is what they would talk about. And the most important thing we're going to talk about is the basis of the Yogacara school, mind alone. And this is one of the things in this sutra, and it's not the only one, that makes its way into our practice, and very, very specifically. Before I do that, I want to reiterate something I said last time, which is the whole notion of practice. So Zen has this notion of practice that's very concrete. Practice means meditation, practice means chanting, practice means prostrations, practice means Kongan practice, practice means walking meditation. In the Hawaiian school, which is based on the sutra, practice is more like the direction of your mind. So you direct your mind in a certain way, and it's not like, sit in this posture and do this with your meditation practice. It doesn't talk very much about that. It talks more about cultivating certain, not states of mind in the sense of stages of enlightenment, but cultivating certain attitudes towards the world. So that's another very big difference, is what practice means. But anyway, so let's talk about Yogacara, and that's mind alone. And it suddenly occurs to me, no, that'd be too much trouble. Okay, it occurred to me I could possibly share the text because it is a PDF, but it occurred to me that PDF might not be searchable because it's sort of just a PDF made from, so then it would be impossible. So I want to talk about, this is in the Eulogies in the Palace of the Suyama Heaven. Comes 4 lines in the poetry part that are found in a slightly different translation in the morning bell chant. And that is, if people want to really know all Buddhas of all times, they should contemplate the nature of the cosmos is but mental construction. And we have it something like, if you want to know all the Buddhas of the 3 worlds, then you should know that the universe is created by mind alone. So that is the basis of the Yogacara school. And Yogacara, as well as Madhyamika, both have a very strong influence on Zen. And this mind alone is a concept that really needs to be unpacked. It's really 2 concepts sort of in one phrase. And one of those concepts itself needs to be unpacked. And when the way Cleary translates, all is but mental construction. So this notion of mental construction. And in his chapter on the Avatamsaka Sutra, Zen Master Sung-san focuses on this. That's what his chapter is all about, really. And he focuses on this notion of mental construction. Mind makes the universe. And let's unpack that very carefully. So the first is kind of obvious. We all have ideas, we all have categories, and we bring those categories to everything that we meet for the first time. So maybe you grow up in a certain kind of musical culture, and then when you hear music that's from a different musical culture, you will put it into the terms of your own culture that you came with. And I think everyone probably has experienced this, that you grow up with a certain kind of music and then you hear music that's radically different. Like maybe you grew up with Western classical music and then you hear oh, I don't know, maybe you hear, traditional Hawaiian music, say, or traditional music from South Asia, or traditional music from Northeast Asia, or traditional African music. Those are very different musical cultures. They're different from each other, and they're very different from Western classical. And the first thing you'll do when you hear something from a different culture is you will put it in terms of what you already know, because that's all you can do. And then gradually, as you become more and more familiar, you are able to put yourself more into the terms of the musical terms of that kind of music. And eventually, you might even be able to completely leave behind the culture that you came from and really see it in its own terms. It's like learning a foreign language. They say when you're learning a foreign language, unless you dream in that language, you don't really know it very well. The vocabulary, so the vocabulary, different words have different contexts in different languages. And you learn a word and you translate into a word of your own language. And then you think that's what it means, but that's not really what it means because it comes from a lot of other places. And completely bilingual. Eileen is at least bilingual. I don't know how many. Ramiro is completely bilingual. And, you guys know what I'm talking about. When you're thinking in one language, it's somehow different when you're thinking in another language. So this is a sense in which we create the universe, but it's a very, it's sort of the most simplistic level in which we create the universe. Um, Another much more complicated level is in which we really create these categories. So here we've got what everyone knows. What is this? It's a glass of presumably water, because I generally don't drink vodka or gin, right? And certainly I wouldn't drink it in such vast quantities, and certainly not at this hour of the day. So yeah, this is almost certainly a glass of water. I guarantee you it's a glass of water. Um, and we all know that this is a glass of water, right? No problem. Now suppose I put this glass out in a forest and just leave it there. And a bunch of ants are crawling around the forest. And if they see it from a distance, unless they get up close, they have no idea what it is. Because glass of water is not a construct that they have. And then they get up closer and closer and closer, and maybe somehow they sense that there's water in it, so they go up the glass and, then they drown because they can't get out, something like that. Maybe they can sense that there's water in there somehow. But I don't think that they have a concept of glass, They probably have some kind of concept of a vessel, like the water is held in something. Of course, they don't have minds like ours, they don't have brains like ours, so they're not articulating it this way. That they probably have some kind of construct, that water is contained in something. Or maybe not, I don't know. But their experience of it, the way they categorize it, is going to be very different. They don't have the notion of this is a glass of water. And we think, oh, we're so much smarter than the ants. We know that this is a glass of water. But they're aware of all kinds of things that we're not aware of, right? So we're just different from the ants. We're not that smart. We're just different. And I like to use the example of a stick floating on the ocean, because we say, oh, there's a stick floating on the ocean. But a fish, they're not going to have any concept of a stick floating on the ocean. And again, we think, oh, we're so smart. We made this concept of stick. And then we think that this concept of stick is what's actually real. And there are philosophers who say that, right? Like Plato said that, that reality, it's stick that's the reality, and the little stick, that's just a manifestation of this idea of stick, and it's the idea of stick, the stickness, that's the reality. And then we do this thing, we have these abstract nouns like truth, beauty, love, right? We have these abstract nouns, and then we argue about what is truth, what is beauty. We made those. They're not there. And the stick as we imagine it is not actually as we imagine it. And this glass of water as we imagine it is not actually as we imagine it. And everyone now knows about physics and these, it looks like it's solid, but actually it's mostly air. And if you look up, there's a wonderful snippet of Richard Feynman explaining how it's quantum mechanics that manages to make this cohere as a glass and manages to keep us not falling through the floor and so on and so forth. And so for modern physics, we have this idea of, we actually know better. It's made out of molecules, and these molecules are made out of atoms. These atoms are made out of subatomic particles, and these subatomic particles are made out of quantum mechanical things, and mostly it's empty space, and we think, we understand it. But even that, this is just our mind. This is just our idea. So this notion that of mental construction, there's another metaphor which occurs in here a lot. They talk about magicians, and it makes its way a lot into Madhyamaka philosophy as well. This notion of a magician, it's like a magician creating an illusion, and everyone sees it and says, oh, there's this beautiful city that appeared. But the city was just created by magic. So there's this, connected with this notion of mental construction, is this notion of unsubstantiality. And then it gets even worse because we actually create time and space. And that's like, what? And Zen Master Sung-san uses the notion of, when you really want something to happen, then a short period of time can seem very long because you're just waiting for this thing to happen. And when you're really absorbed in something, then a long period of time can feel really short. When we I guess it was when we practiced in person on Monday, a number of people said, wow, that was so short, because, it was so great to be in a room together for those of us who were in a room together. And so those of us who were in the room, some people said, wow, that was so short. But it was just, that we were really absorbed in what we were doing. But that's even a kind of a sort of very elementary level of the notion of creating time and space. If you try to create a coherent theory of time, you'll discover it's not possible. And St. Augustine actually knew this. He tried. He did his best. There's a wonderful book by Carlo Rovelli called, is it The Arrow of Time? I could look it up. Anyway, look up Carlo Rovelli and the book with time in it. And he creates a whole bunch. He shows how any kind of sort of comprehensive notion of time, it always runs into some problem. The basic issue of time flowing, the metaphor of time flowing from past to present to future, is inherently extremely problematic, and yet that's our experience, right? But that's extremely problematic. So this notion of mind makes everything, or everything is a mental construction, it's very profound. It's it does not deny the reality of this universe. It does not deny the reality of our experience. But what it really is, what it really points to me, and now I'm going off the Avatamsaka Sutra because it doesn't say this, what it really points to me is don't know. It's telling us you don't know anything. You think you know, but you don't know. And that, anyway, so that's one aspect of this notion of mental construction, or the universe is made of mind alone. There's another notion of it in which mind almost becomes like a substance, although it can't because of emptiness, right? Everything's empty, including emptiness. But this notion of mind is actually, this whole universe is mind. It's not just that our poor little human minds are creating this kind of magic trick that we all believe in that enables us to function, but it's the flip side of that is that everything is mind. And the Avatamsaka Sutra, this becomes like mind and Vairocana, mind and Buddha nature. They all get kind of, Vairocana, Buddha nature, mind. They kind of become identified with each other. They become conflated. So we have this this notion of mind as, I hesitate to say, but I will say, the substance of the universe. Mind is what the universe is made out of. And so that's another way of thinking about, I like, our translation better, instead of the universe is but mental construction, because that's the limited thing. The universe is created by mind alone, and then this has this, that's when this double vision really comes into effect. Both we each individually create our universe, and the universe really is created by mind alone. Okay, and I have a couple of questions here. Is that separate from individual minds? Is there an individual mind also? Great question. Mind, quote, as the universe, is that what we hear sometimes as consciousness? So to answer the second question, I don't really know what consciousness means, and nobody really knows what consciousness means. It's like, it's one of those things like time, space, beauty, truth, love, and we know that we don't know because computer scientists are working very hard. In fact, one of my closest friends in graduate school later became a computer scientist, and she, her husband, and her son are all very famous computer scientists. So it's very weird. You have this family writing joint papers together, and they are working very hard on trying to create consciousness in artificial intelligence, and a lot of people are. And one of the big issues is, how do you define consciousness? And it's very interesting that she and her husband and her son, I should say their names, Lenore Blum, Manuel Blum, and Avram Blum, they are somewhat focused on the notion of pain or discomfort. And we hardly ever communicate anymore, but she happened to mention that to me, and I wrote back, that's the first noble truth, it's discomfort. But it is, can the computer say, I don't like this? That's so, yeah, so that's a really interesting question. Mind is the universe, that sometimes what we hear is consciousness, and my answer is, I have no idea. Ask a different person what consciousness means, and they'll tell you. There's some kind of sense of self involved in consciousness. That you are aware that you are a being that is aware. Has this kind of regressive quality. You are aware that you are a being that is aware. But yeah, that's a really good question that I don't have an answer for. That's the best kind of question. And then this question is, so is this mind, is that separate from individual minds? Is there an individual mind also? And that's another really wonderful question. And that kind of gets to the heart of the Mahayana. And, the image that I like is the four fingers, on a hand, and they look like they're separate, but they're all related. And they're related to this guy too, which you didn't see a minute ago. Right? So, so in the Mahayana, there's this sense that we are distinct in some sense, and in another sense, we are deeply, 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 deeply interconnected. That's the whole Indra's net and everything like that. So, yeah, I can't read your minds. I don't know. Maybe Andy's thinking about what he's going to have for dinner later. I have no idea. You know? Maybe Vera's thinking about where she's going to take her next vacation because she's always traveling around. I have no idea. You know, I could go on and on about different people. Maybe the videographer is secretly watching a billiards video on his computer while he's doing this. I don't know. You know, so in that sense, yeah, we are, each of our minds is sort of separate from each other. But in another sense, you know, we're all manifestations. We're all not manifestations. We're all part of the same thing. We're deeply, deeply, deeply connected. So the whole notion of individual becomes sort of suspect. It's one of those things that's useful for our functioning. We have to. It's you know, we're set up to think in these terms because otherwise we can't function. But there's this deep interconnection. So okay, um, gosh. Uh, I've lost whatever I was going to say. I've lost, but that's okay because those are great questions. Um, so that's Yogacara, and that took a while. Is part of the function of Kangan's to recognize the connectedness of our minds. That's a really good question. I think I've never thought of it that way, but maybe, yeah, maybe because we talk about mind-to-mind transmission and stuff like that. Yeah, maybe. Um, Yeah, I don't want to get into Kunlun practice right now because it's way out of this. Okay, so connected to this, these two aspects of what it means to say the universe is created by mind alone is the identity of absolute and relative. And I'll remind everyone, I'm listing the philosophical notions of the Avatamsaka Sutra that are foundational to Zen is what I'm doing here. So the identity of the absolute and relative, which is very important in Zen. In fact, in Soto Zen, there's a wonderful poem called the Sandokai, which is basically the translation of the title as the identity of the absolute and the relative. So Sudana's teachers are a very good example. So Sudana is, you know, this sort of teenager, I guess, is sort of set out on this course of study that takes him years, and he visits. And Jennifer reminded me last time how many teachers. What is it, 53 or 56 or something like that? 53 teachers. I haven't written here, and it takes a really long time. And each teacher has these profound teachings, and they're all described in terms of you know, the way you describe Buddhas, right? They're all like sitting on thrones or sitting in these palaces or sitting in these mansions or sitting in these lush gardens. And then they're like gardens within gardens or mansions within mansions. And there are all kinds of, you know, divine creatures sort of crowded around them and everything like that. Whether they're a monk or a housewife or a prostitute or a perfumer. I guess that was important back then, or you know, whatever. There's a grammarian. They have all kinds of jobs. They're earth goddesses and night goddesses and devas. You know, these sort of, you know, they're children. There's Buddha's birth mother. You know, there are all these different kinds of people. So they come from all these walks of life, and so this notion that, you know, they're not like heavenly beings. They're not all great monks and nuns. They come from everywhere. And much of their teaching is that the practice of their life is itself a teaching. So the prostitute, she was known in Korean, I'm translating because I don't know what the Korean, she's known as Passamillion. And the idea is that all these men would sleep with her, and then when they, you know, came to climax, they'd suddenly wake up, and then they'd never have sex again. So you wonder, why did they do that? Why they go to her in the first place if they knew this was going to happen? But anyway, so even an act of prostitution, which is about as relative as you can get, becomes a manifestation of the absolute. And so, and this identity of absolute and relative also has this notion that practice is not just on the cushion. Practice is what we actually do in our life. And, there's that wonderful Kangan, what is the true way? Everyday mind is the way, right? And so I want to read page 966. I have so many things quoted that I can't remember what I've quoted, but let's see what it is. Yeah. So there's this description. These are the Buddha's. It starts off with, here's one of these magic things. I might as well quote it. As when a skilled magician causes various things to appear, they're coming, speaking of Buddhists, from nowhere, they go nowhere. The nature of illusions is not finite, nor is it infinite, but in the midst of a crowd, the Buddha manifests the infinite and the finite, and so on. I already talked about that, but there it was popping up. So here, furthermore, still discussing the Buddhas, to those not at rest, they bring rest. To those at peace, they show the side of enlightenment. Thus do they go throughout the cosmos, their minds without attachment, not dwelling on ultimate reality, and not entering nirvana. Thus they go throughout the worlds, enlightening living beings. So I guess that's bodhisattvas, not Buddhas. So not dwelling on ultimate reality, not entering nirvana. Thus they go throughout the worlds, enlightening living beings. In all worlds, they realize true awakening moment to moment, yet cultivate the practice as enlightening beings without ever retreating. The various bodies in the world they know all completely. Thus, knowing physical phenomena, they realize the body of the Buddha. Thus, knowing physical phenomena, they realize the body of the Buddha. So, this identity of absolute and relative, that function is what's important. So that's there. And then I have another along Everyday Mind is the Way, page 344. Enlightening beings, as bodhisattvas, various methods and techniques adapt to worldly conditions to liberate beings. Just like lotus blossoms to which water does not adhere, in the same way they are in the world, provoking great faith. So you're not apart from the world. You have to be right there. Everyday mind is the way. And then I had this thing, awareness as the ground of all phenomena, that page 968. Defiled or undefiled, learners' minds, non-learners' minds, untold numbers of minds. They know at every moment. They know they are not one or two, not defiled and not pure, and also without mixture. All arise from one's own notions. Thus they clearly see all living beings with minds and thoughts, each different, creating various worlds. That gets back to what, it was Jennifer's questions. Is there an individual mind also? Yeah. Let's see. And then the very, very important notion of emptiness, which is the middle way school, the Madhyamaka school. That's very important in that. Book 10, page 299. The nature of things is fundamentally birthless, yet they appear to have birth. Herein there is no revealer, and nothing that's revealed. Eye, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, intellect, the faculties of sense, all are void and essenceless. Essenceless. The deluded mind conceives them to exist. Seen as they truly are, all are without inherent nature. The eye of reality is not conceptual. We were always talking about before thinking. This seeing is not false. Real or unreal, false or not false, mundane or transmundane, there's nothing but descriptions. So don't mistake your descriptions of the world for the world as it is. And any way you try to describe it, guess what? You're describing it. If you say this is real, that's a description. You're saying it's unreal, that's a description. You're saying it's false, that's a description. You say it's true, that's a description. You say it's mundane, that's a description. You say it's transmundane, that's a description. All are void and essenceless. And I should say that this was a response to Manjushri asking the Bodhisattva chief of the awakened, since the nature of mind is one, what is the reason for seeing the existence of various differences, such as going to good or bad tendencies, having complete or imperfect faculties, differences in birth, beauty and ugliness, pain and pleasure, suffering and happiness? Why is it that activity doesn't know mind, mind doesn't know activity, reception doesn't know consequence, consequence doesn't know reception, mind doesn't know reception, reception doesn't know mind, cause doesn't know condition, condition doesn't know cause, knowledge doesn't know object, object doesn't know knowledge? And that's part of the answer to that question. It's really big. These bodhisattvas are all asking each other. Yeah, Shika asked, what is reception? I just realized, I don't know. I'm not sure. I would think that reception means like receiving information in this context. It doesn't mean having a party. You know, I'm having a reception. It doesn't mean that. Yeah, let's see. And then the importance of clarity of mind, page 980. Any who wish to know the realm of Buddha should make their minds clean as space, and I'll bet that could be translated as clear as space, getting rid of false notions and graspings, making the mind unhindered wherever it turns. So that phrase, clear like space, that's where it comes from, okay? And this notion, getting rid of false notions and graspings, making the mind unhindered wherever it turns. This also came up in the previous quote, the thing about not being attached to our thinking. That wasn't how I put it. This is, of course, the great teaching of Huineng. You know, just don't be attached to thinking. Very simple. That's Huineng's essential teaching in the Platform Sutra. Non-attachment to thinking. So, and the importance of clarity of mind. I mean, it was right there. Make their minds clean as space or clear like space. But it popped up in some of the other things I quoted too. This notion of a mind that is clear, it is unhindered. You know, even more clear than this glass of water, because you know this water is it's refracting light. You look through it and things don't exactly look as they do, but your mind should be so clear that you can just see through everything. And then the connected with this notion of non-attachment to our thinking is questioning our own perceptions of reality. And I have so many quotes on that. I mean, what I just quoted is can be done. I have like about 6 or 7 of them. Let me just do a few. Let's see, page 299. Oh, I already read that. Good. And that was the Manjushri, page 403. And that was the answer to Manjushri. You can see these ideas really connect to each other. They're kind of hard to parse out, make different. If bodhisattvas can, okay, let me start earlier. Contemplating each of these 10 powers of the enlightened, in each power are innumerable meanings. One should ask about them, and after having heard about them, should arouse a mind of great kindness and compassion. That's interesting. And observe sentient beings without abandoning them. Reflect on the teachings unceasingly. Carry out superlative deeds without seeking rewards. Comprehend that objects are like dreams, like illusions, like reflections, like echoes, and like magical productions. If bodhisattvas can unite with such contemplations, they will not entertain a dualistic understanding of things, and all enlightening teachings will become evident to them. At the time of their first determination, they will immediately attain complete perfect enlightenment, will know all things are the mind's own nature, and will perfect the body of wisdom and understand without relying on another. So these ideas are not separate. You can't read about one of them without bumping into the other ones, right? Let's see. Keep track of time. What was that? Okay, so here are the 10 kinds of knowledge. All Buddhas know things, all things have no aim, yet they can produce knowledge of dedicated undertaking. All Buddhas know all things have no body, yet they can produce knowledge of pure bodies. All Buddhas know all things are fundamentally non-dual, yet they can produce knowledge capable of awareness and understanding. All Buddhas know all things have no self and no being, yet they can produce knowledge to civilized beings, and so on. So again, we have this notion of questioning the perception of reality, the terms in which we usually see reality, and at the same time being able to use those in order to help. Let's see, 966. I already read that. That was about going through the world, enlightening all beings. I already read that. And I already read that. Okay, so these are the very closely related notions that are fundamental to Zen that come out of this sutra. The mind alone is different manifestations. The identity of the absolute and the relative. Everyday mind. Practice is what we do. Awareness is the ground of all phenomena. Emptiness and clarity of mind and questioning our common perception of reality. And that's what Zen takes from this. Basic to Mahayana, and I'm not going to get into this because a lot of it is in the Mahayana class that I gave before. The interpenetration, the worlds within worlds, the sort of fantastical nature of the worlds, the vast notion of universe upon universe and all of that. Many metaphors about that, like Indra's net, the Buddha's body emitting light, and so on and so forth. That's very basic in the Mahayana vision. It's not very present in Zen. There are occasionally like allusions to it, like that low-class bodhisattva who suddenly comes from down below past 900 million countries or something like that. This low-class bodhisattva appears to wake up the woman in samadhi who Manjushri couldn't wake up. So occasionally it sort of leaks into Kangans, but it's not very essential to Zen. The notion of a bodhisattva, obviously that's important in Zen. It's very foundational in the Mahayana. The bodhicitta, the determination to be enlightened, the wanting to be enlightened, the direction towards enlightenment, is very basic in Mahayana, and as a result in Zen. The Tathagarbha, Buddha nature, again, that appears in Zen. It's not like one of the things that sort of makes emphasized very much, but yeah, Buddha nature is there. And in fact, the early Kungan work, we do a lot of stuff with Buddha nature. And then, of course, compassion. Um, and compassion not as a feeling, but compassion as what you do. That the whole point is to help each other. That's why we practice. We don't practice for our personal enlightenment. We practice to help this world. And Zen Master Sung San, obviously, he was very big on that. Shoda Harada is also very big on that. If you read a lot of the classical texts, they say very little. Zen texts, they say astonishingly little about that. It's sort of surprising to me. They tend to emphasize waking up, and they don't why wake up. They tend not to look at that so much. Um, but anyway, and as I said, I'm not going to go into that stuff very much because it was in the Mahayana class. And um, anyway, okay. So, are there any questions at this point?
I have a question. I was talking to serious Christians last night, and I mentioned that I practiced Zen and told them a little bit about it, but all of a sudden it occurred to me that I would like to know something in 2 minutes that I could tell somebody about what Zen is.
Wake up and help this world.
That's it, huh? Okay. I sort of mentioned that, but yes, it's very strange to be among Christians, but I'm in Southwest Missouri, so they're all around me.
Yeah. Okay. Someone asked me to repeat a line. Unfortunately, I'm not sure where that line came from. Um, the line that ended common perception of reality, and I'm not sure where it was. So I can't repeat it. Um, but anyway. Um, okay. So let me.
I don't have a question. I have a comment, just a comment that
Yeah, sure.
the fish, the image of the fish in the glass of water, for some reason, really got to me.
Oh, thank
Um,
you.
yeah, in terms of just being what you said about don't mistake my description of the world as the real world. If you
Mhm.
don't have that concept for it, there's some old story. I should look it up about it's some native peoples or something not recognizing boats on the horizon because they didn't have a concept for them or they didn't see them or something.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's not that they're stupid because we do the same thing. I
Yes.
mean, whatever culture you're from, you're going to miss something from another culture. I have a question here. I want to say I have a few more things I want to say, but I said something about questioning our common perception of reality. Does that help? That is a wonderful question. We need a commonality of reality, and we see what's happening politically, not just in the US, but in many countries around the world, where people have distinct perceptions of reality. They have no common perception of reality, and we see the suffering that causes. My own personal awakening to that, I was raised as a good Zionist Jewish girl, and I was going to the University of California at Berkeley as a graduate student. They had this big Sproul Plaza, and they had political tables there, political groups, and they had the Israelis and they had the Palestinians right next to each other. And if you stood in front of them and closed your eyes, they were saying exactly the same thing. This is our land. This is our land. You know, we belong here. We belong here. They're trying to take it from us. They're trying to take it from us. And I went to myself, whoa. you know. So without a common perception of reality, we can't get along. So we need a common perception of reality. Also, we can't function. You have to know that a red light means stop. Otherwise, you're going to be in a car crash and cause other car crashes, and there will be a lot of suffering. So we need a common perception of reality. We definitely need it in order to function. But we have to understand that this reality is provisional. It is, just like the boats on the horizon. If provisionally you don't know what that is, and then you discover, then you find out what a boat is. Then you know what a boat on the horizon is. Then maybe you learn to sail the boat. So we definitely need a common perception of reality, and we have to work this out together. And it's very, very interesting. I mean, sociologists and psychologists spend a lot of time trying to understand how social groups create realities. So we need it. And it not only helps, it's essential. On the other hand, we need to also have this don't know mind. This mind that recognizes that these conclusions that we come to are provisional. And, science is a really good way of, science really understands this. Like in the beginning, people didn't know if face masks were effective, so they said, don't bother. And then they said, oh my God, they're really effective, so use it. So people who have this idea that reality is this fixed thing that you find out about it and then that's the end of it, they couldn't understand it. They said, well, that's proof that they don't know what they're talking about. No, it's proof that they are observant and that they learn. Okay, so at any given moment, we have this common perception, or hopefully we have these common perceptions, and then we're open to revising them. So yeah, that's a really important question. There's a way of kind of valorizing and romanticizing, not having sort of being kind of having a perception of reality that is not connected to what the people around you have, and it gets tricky. Like if I, here I am, a Buddhist and a Jew, and if I were suddenly dropped into, where is it, Southwest Missouri you're in, and I had to live there for the rest of my life, and there were no other Buddhists and no other Jews, and I have this like reality, and everyone else has this other reality. That's an interesting issue. But yeah, on some level, we all had to know the password to get in here. On that level, we need a common reality. And yeah, it's all of these questions, they lead to such deep issues. They seem like, they're really deep questions. They're wonderful questions. So thank you. I wanted to say a little bit about where we find this stuff in our chants. The morning bell chant is steeped in the Avatamsaka Sutra. It even mentions the Avatamsaka Sutra. It invokes Vairocana. In the beginning of the morning bell chant, we're opening the jade text. That's the Avatamsaka Sutra. It invokes Vairocana. Twice it mentions names of the Buddha. It gives different number to how many names, and it says all, and by the way, they're all the same name. It talks about mind alone. I already gave you that quote. It talks about the physical characteristics of the Buddha, which are referenced in I think one chapter really focuses on that, and then they come up again at other times. So the morning bell chant is steeped in this. The morning bell chant is really a compilation of Hwa Om, which is the Korean version of Huayan, Hwa Om Buddhism, which is based in the sutra, Pure Land, because we're always invoking Amida Buddha, and also Zen. So it's or Sun. So the morning bell chant is really a compilation of those three. And then Heart Sutra, emptiness. Hello. That's what the Heart Sutra is about. It's about emptiness and compassion. And they can't be separated. Once you see that, if you see the nature of emptiness, because it's not like nihilism, if you see the nature of emptiness, then you see the interconnectedness, then how can you not be compassionate? They're just intimately connected, which, from the way I was raised, you'd say, what? But one of the wonderful things that I love about Buddhism is the way that ontology, which is what exists, epistemology, which is how we know what exists, And then ethics are just so tightly intertwined. You can't separate them. And of course, in Western philosophy, well, I specialize in ontology, I specialize in epistemology, I specialize in ethics. But, they're just tightly intertwined in Buddhism. I see another question here. Oh, Zen Huayan and Pure Land. That's the morning bell chant. That's all the Amida Buddha stuff. Anyway, so we have that. And then, and I talked about this a lot in the Mahayana class. I just gave all these examples of where this stuff come into the koans. And as I said, they come in sort of glancingly, but, just sort of at random, like Mumen Kwan number 20, the poem. So which one is number 20? Number 20 is the one about a man of great strength. So Master Songwon said, why is it the man of great strength cannot lift his leg? Again, he said, it is not with his tongue that he speaks. And then lifting his leg, he crushes the scented oceans. Lowering his head, he looks down on the four Dhyana heavens. There is no place to put this gigantic body. You please add a line. Okay, so you have this person, you think of, okay, some bodybuilder. Why can't he lift his leg? Or why is it that a man of great strength can't lift his leg? And then the poem goes, lifting his leg, he crushes the scented ocean. So now we're in Avatamsaka Buddha territory. In the Blue Cliff Record, Solbang's The Whole Great Earth. This is number 5. Where is it? Solbang teaching assembly said, pick up the whole great earth in your fingers, and it's as big as a grain of rice. Throw it down before you. If, like a lacquer bucket, you don't know, I'll beat the drum to summon everyone to look. So you pick up the whole great earth in your fingers, it's as big as a grain of rice, and then you can throw it down. So again, this is this magical world. Blue Cliff Record number 29, the great Kalpa fire destroys the whole universe. So this is this medicine in Blue Cliff Record 87. I love this one. Unmun teaching his assembly said, medicine and disease cure each other. The whole universe is medicine. What is your true self? That's just amazing. But medicine and disease cure each other. So that's this vision, this non-dualistic vision. You don't have medicine over here and disease over here. Medicine and disease cure each other. And you could just go on and on and on. Pai Chang's fox, where you're this magical, being, this fox has been reborn for 500 generations as a fox. And De Tongji Sung sat for 10 kalpas. Now, a kalpa is like the lifetime of the universe, right? So this guy is sitting for 10 kalpas. You think about it, it doesn't make sense because, the beginning of a universe and the end of a universe, you don't have bodies, right? Because, the whole thing is, first it starts out pure energy and then it ends as, whatever. But anyway, there's so much. There's so much in the koans. Kungbang's one way. Let's see. That's in the Muan Kwan, number 48. A monk asked Zen Master Kunbang, all Buddhas of the 10 directions have one way to the gate of nirvana. I don't understand. Where is this way? Kunbang held up his stick, drew a line, and said, here it is. Later, a monk asked Unmun for Kunbang's teaching. Unmun held up his fan and said, this fan has jumped up to the 33rd heaven and stuck in the god's nose there, hit the carp of the eastern sea, and it rains pouring buckets. So that's not only in this magical world, but it's also kind of funny, And then at Blue Cliff Record number 60, Unmun's staff. Unmun showed his staff to the assembly and said, This staff has changed into a dragon and swallowed heaven and earth. Mountains, rivers, the great earth. Where can they be found? So this stuff, it leaks into our koans. This world that's vast and wild, this time and space are flexible. This the identity of the relative and the absolute. I mean, there's so much. I have like another page of notes on this, but it's 11:01, and Carol already had to disappear. So I guess I'll stop here and ask if there are any more questions.
How would you go about chanting some of these if you
I,
one
I,
one?
I, I don't know. I don't know how to chant this. Um, I mean, most people would probably chant it in, most people who chanted would probably chant it in Chinese or Sino-Korean or Sino-Japanese, whatever, and these would basically be people who had were undergoing monastic training or had a lot of monastic training. I do know, as I mentioned in the first class, I do know people who read a bit of it in English every day, and some of them maybe chant it out loud. I don't know. I've never asked. I don't know what kind of tune you would use. I can't imagine. But maybe there's some kind of, like the Heart Sutra, you say, you repeat a note and then you go down a little and then you repeat a note and you go down a little. You could try it, see what happens. It would take you the rest of your life to get through it. And that's if you live a long time. I should tell you, Ramiro, I'm starting to learn the Goldberg variations, which and that's like what 57 or 60 pages of music, and I'm figuring it'll take me several years to do it, and hopefully I live long enough. Avatamsaka Sutra is like that, only worse because it's longer. So
I'll
yeah.
send you a recording that I made with for trio, an arrangement for trio. I play violin and sometimes mandolin. So
Oh, cool. I'd love to hear that. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, yeah.
So, how people that read a little bit of it every day,
Mhm.
are they reading it like in succession? Are they just picking a page and
No. You're asking me about something that I don't do and that I've never asked.
okay?
But you can ask Barry Briggs because he's the guy that I know who at least did it one time and maybe still does. He would like he went.
I
Yeah.
I have a comment about that.
Yeah.
I forget the name of the entry into the inconceivable
Yeah.
by Cleary, which is
Yeah.
kind of a condensed version of this. He talks about I think it's a Zen master who would just open up a
At
page like
random.
random.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a practice I guess at least one person
Yeah.
did.
Right.
So
Yeah, you can do it any way you want. You can choose to do just the poetry part. Yeah, but you could ask Barry what he does. But he
Okay.
would do it like either before or after, I forget what, sitting every day. And the way we read from the whole world is a single flower, and he would himself, his personal practice, Avatamsaka Sutra. And Shika, you raised your hand.
Um, yeah, you had us read the poem that starts, it's like a painter, but you didn't talk about it.
Wait, which one was that?
It's on page 451. Allegedly it's on page 398 and 451. I don't remember the numbers exactly. One of them is 451 though, and it's like a painter.
Oh, 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 oh. Okay, is it on page 451 in the real book? Yes. No, I don't. Oh, just as a painter can't know his own mind. Okay. Yeah, that was as an example of the rhetoric. So just as a painter can't know their own mind, I have to change that. Yet paints due to the mind, so is the nature of all things. Yeah, right. And Shika, you're a painter. So, yeah, mind is like an artist able to paint the worlds. The 5 clusters, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, are all born there. Thence there's nothing it doesn't make. Oh, that's great. I'd forgotten I'd assigned that. Yeah, that's perfect. And that's what leads up to, if people really want to know, all Buddhas of past, present, and future, they should know that the universe is created by mind alone. That's what leads up to it. So thank you for reminding me of that. Yeah. And, I could give a quiz at this point. Okay. Mind, just as a painter can't know their own mind, yet paints due to the mind, so is the nature of all things. Mind is like an artist able to paint the world, all 5, etc. I could say, okay, which of the things that I've talked about are exemplified in this or referred to in this, little snippet? And it's a great snippet. Thank you for reminding me of it. Great. Okay. Yeah. Was that the question did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions? Oh, I have something in the chat here. Okay. Vivian had to leave. Okay.
So in the Mahayana vision, is every human being a bodhisattva?
This piece of paper is a bodhisattva.
Is
Every,
Sudana bodhisattva?
we're not bodhisattvas yet. Everything has Buddha nature. And the nature of Buddha nature is to aspire to Buddhahood or bodhisattvahood or whatever you want to call it. And a bodhisattva is one who has such a deep realization that they can effectively act. But in every moment you can act as a bodhisattva. And since time and space are not linear, yeah, you're a bodhisattva. But
Thank you.
in another moment, you might not be. Okay? But yeah.
I mean,
the important thing is not so the bodhisattva, this is a kind of a being we are supposed to aspire to. It's like the carrot at the end of the stick to keep the donkey, the carrot at the end of the stick to keep the donkey going forward, right? I'm going to keep moving towards that carrot. But it's the Buddha nature that's really important, because the Buddha nature is your nature right now. And realizing this Buddha nature is what's important. Okay?
but the Buddha isn't the Buddha nature the bodhicitta?
No, Buddha nature is Tathagata Garbha. Bodhicitta is the aspiration to enlightenment.
Which also translates into Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, right?
A complete, perfect enlightenment.
Right. That aspiration is complete, perfect enlightenment.
Well, Eileen is shaking her head in despair. Sheikah's saying, I am so confused. Okay. So now we're tangled up in language, right? So Eileen's nodding her head. So in some sense, yeah, you already have Buddha nature, so there's nothing to worry about. But on the other hand, we're mostly not in touch with our Buddha nature, right? We're scrolling our phones. We're eating bad food. We're being mean to the people around us. We're kicking the cat. We kind of forget our Buddha nature. We're not in touch with our Buddha nature. So we need to be in touch with our Buddha nature. We need to be intimate with our Buddha nature. We need our Buddha nature to allow our Buddha nature to function through us. And then we have these words that are aspirational, like Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi, complete perfect enlightenment. Oh, I want complete perfect enlightenment. Yeah, that's a really good idea. I'll practice hard so I can have complete perfect enlightenment. Okay? And then we have this notion of a bodhisattva. Oh, I want to be a bodhisattva. I want to be like whoever. It's like people who wear the "What Would Jesus Do" bracelets. It's the same function. It's reminding you, oh yeah, you can be better than you are right now. It's sort of giving you like, what is it? Be like Mike or Ike or something like that. So it's giving you like an aspirational direction. And yeah, you can try to conflate these things, but why do that? Anyway, Ashika, you're so polite. You raise your hand. That's so great. Okay.
The thing with the creating the everything being created by mind, and you had just said something about kicking cats and these kinds of things, and uh, is there like an inherent sort of Buddha natureness to particular actions, or is that more uh, is that more just putting descriptions on space or something?
I think it's putting just more descriptions on. When you're causing more suffering. Actually, you don't always know, but most of the time we know when we're causing more suffering, and we know when we're alleviating suffering. And the direction is alleviating suffering. And whether you want to call that Buddha nature or not is not important. What's important is alleviating the suffering. That's what's important. So don't, I know, Shika, you would never kick your cat. So, yeah. Are there any other questions? Eileen, I see you're unmuted. Do you have a question?
Well, I'm kind of poised still on the form is emptiness, emptiness is form point.
Mm-hmm.
And listening to all this, it seems to always come back to this point where two things are really together. The form, the emptiness, the universal, the particular, the end, the beginning. And we have to hold both these things together in every moment of everything we do.
Mm-hmm.
So we say Buddha nature, but Buddha nature is not a thing.
That's right. Very good. Excellent. A plus. That's the point. Yeah, not a thing. Right. Did I stop you prematurely?
No, it's just so simple, but to make it actual in every moment, that you see that everything, every moment is empty, everything without exception. Wow.
You don't have to see that every moment is empty, because then you're making emptiness. What you have to see is every moment. Okay? Because if you say, oh, I must see that every moment is empty, then the notion of emptiness is coming between you and what's actually going on.
But I find that in terms of practice, as a person who isn't awake in every moment, that when I get stuck on something, it helps to take a step back and reconnect to the emptiness behind that stuckness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Shika, you had your hand raised again and then you took it down?
No, I think it was a confusion with my internet connection, so I just repeatedly put it down.
Are there any other questions? Because we've been going on for a while. Are there any other questions?
I was just trying to puzzle out the main characters here, aside from Sudana, seem to be Varochana, Manjushri, and Samantadabra.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
which we don't really. I have not really encountered Samantadabra
Samantabhadra.
Badra prior to this.
Yeah. Well, you actually have encountered Samantabhadra in temple paintings, but you didn't notice. Yeah, Samantabhadra is not talked of very much in Zen and talked about a lot in YN. It's just, where your focus is. Samantabhadra is very cool. Samantabhadra has a kind of feminine appearance and often rides on an elephant, a white elephant, who I believe is seven-tusked, or I might be conflating that elephant with the one who impregnated Queen Maya. But anyway, Samantabhadra is carrying a parasol on an elephant in a lot of iconography. Yeah. And Samantabhadra is the bodhisattva of action. So, yeah. Mira.
Oh, sorry. Well, I just remembered that Samantabhadra also symbolizes the Sangha, right? And Manjushri, uh, the Dharma, and
That's in Huayan
in
Buddhism.
Huayan, yeah.
In Huayan, that's
And
right.
I forget the other one.
Chan is
Oh,
the Buddha.
right. Okay. Yes,
Oh.
right.
That's okay. Yeah, right. And yeah, so the Huayan has a system in which Vairochan is sort of encompasses the notion of Buddha. Manjushri encompasses the notion of Dharma in the sense of wisdom, and Samantabhadra encompasses the notion of action, which means Sangha. So yeah, that's right. And if you read Tony Price's wonderful book, Universal Enlightenment, he talks about that a lot. Yeah. Any other questions?
Just an observation. I think you have encountered Samantabhadra Bodhisattva. In the Korean chants, he's called Bohyeon Bosa.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But we don't talk about him. We don't talk about him very much.
I always think of him as, I said, the great action, the living vow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Tom.
Well, so, one theme that, I've heard you talk about a lot is how, the impediments of language and the imperfectness of language. And yet, one of the themes here in the sutra is the large encompassing the small and the small encompassing the large, right? And try as I might, I cannot wordlessly picture that in my mind, and yet I'm able to understand it through language. If you're trying, can you draw a picture of that in your mind? I'm not able to, and yet the language makes it understandable somehow.
Well, language is very useful. Nobody's saying language isn't useful. I mean, we've been talking for an hour and 18 minutes here, right? Pretty much nonstop. So yeah, language is a tool. But you don't mistake the hammer for the piece of wood it's about to hammer the nail in, right? So that's an imperfect analogy. So yeah, so you use language, but you don't hold it tightly. You don't hold anything tightly. So you use language, but you understand its limitations. So when we find our minds, getting into this sort of, and some of the questions that people had were along these natures, and we all do this. I mean, where you're trying to make very tight sense of something in the language world and confusing it with the real world. And just distinction. The language is useful, but it can only take us so far. Okay?
Okay.
And I have this question from Shika. When you say Dharma is like wisdom, whom Manjushri represents, is that like benevolence is wisdom? I don't, again, you have this thing, is benevolence wisdom? Is compassion wisdom? And again, we're making distinctions that I don't know are useful. It's an example of what Tom was just talking about. So we have these different concepts. And so what is wisdom? I don't know what wisdom is. I sort of have a sense that, it's not wise to drink a gallon of bleach. I have that sense, right? But what is wisdom. And you know, go down the vortex if you go down there. But we have a sense of what function this word plays in our language. We have a sense of what direction it's asking us to look in. And yeah, you could say that ultimately compassion is the true wisdom. You could say that. I don't know. You know, benevolence is an interesting word, because benevolence implies that, you know, well, I'm okay, you're not okay, so I'll be benevolent towards you. Whereas compassion sort of, to me, it kind of brings us all together. But you know, then we're getting caught on language. Well, is benevolence better than compassion? You know, I mean, that's stupid. You know, just, are we helping each other? You know, that's what's important. Are we helping each other? So yeah. And I'd like to sort of end on reminding everybody of this each other thing. So this is a, you know, the words again in our morning bell chant. Which you know, where we vow, it's, you know, we have these 3 poems. The first one is about you know, the, you know, the mountains are the Buddha's home, and then the vast extinction palace is the sea, and then you have all beings come and take without hindrance. That's the first one. And then the second one is about, you know, sitting in the quiet night. And this is, you know, the Dharma is in this quiet night, quietness. Why does the wind shake the trees? And then you have the geese. The first one you have the crane, then you have the geese, and then you have this one, which is, you know, together we vow with all beings, together to enter the great Dharma ocean, together to save all beings, together in one instant, wake up together. So I'd like to end there. So thank you, everybody. And I think we're going to take next month off as far as classes go.
Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. It's always a treat. And I love your questions. You always have such great questions. Thank you. Okay, so hope to see many of you in the, well, some of you at least in the Dharma room, and most of you online on Tuesday morning as we try our first real.
There's just one last thing before you go. It was triggered by this question about wisdom and so forth. Many years ago, the person who introduced me to this whole thing, the formal introduction, actually said, we were discussing wisdom and compassion and their roles. And he said, actually, compassion is method.